my name is Everett Faber. I was born in the town of Goodrich in Taylor County in 1919, July the 31st. And I attended school in 8th grade, as we had no high school at that time out there. I was back 13 miles in the brush, so there was no way of going to high school, so all we had is the 8th grade school.
How old were you when you got out of 8th grade then?
I think I was 13, I think it was.
And then what did you do, work on the farm at that point?
I worked a little on the farm, and then I went working out in the wheat fields in North Dakota. And then I used to ride the freights. I'd go out in Washington and pick apples, and Idaho and pick potatoes and top sugar beets. And then I come home. That was in 1937, and it was actually when we went out there was 7 of us went in a big Master Buick car, and of course the rest of them all got homesick, and it was just me and the guy that owned the car left. And he says, "Well, we can't afford to run that Buick," he said, "so I'll sell it." So he got $35 for the car, and we hit the freights, and we went out to Washington and picked apples, and then we picked potatoes. We got 5 cents a bag for picking potatoes, and then you had to board yourself out of that. You could make about 3.5 a day if you worked from daylight to dark. But when we got done with the potatoes, then the last thing there was to do out there was topping sugar beets. And of course then they paid a little less because everybody wanted the last jobs. So you could make about $2.50 topping sugar beets by the ton. And when I got done with that, it was just me and my friend Harry left. And
All these other guys came from Medford too that went out there with you to work?
They didn't go out with us. They left and went back home already in North Dakota. They didn't stay very long.
Oh, they were from North Dakota?
No, they were from Wisconsin.
Oh, they were?
They got homesick and went home. Yeah. So then when we got done topping sugar beets in Idaho, the rancher there, he offered us, he said if we went on to stay and work all winter feeding the cattle and that, he'd give us $10 a month. And of course, my friend, he took him up on it. I didn't want it. I wanted to come back home and go hunting. So I took the freights and went back to St. Paul on the freight, and then I caught me a Greyhound and went home. So that was pretty well that.
What were the circumstances when you were called up by the military? Where were you at that time?
I was at North Dakota, Towner, North Dakota, and there was a little white school way out on the prairie someplace. I had to go register, and I kept telling the guy I wasn't a native of North Dakota, but he didn't listen to that, and he got me as I was a native, so I got drafted out of North Dakota anyhow, you know.
Yeah. And do you remember what year that was?
That was 1940.
And how old were you at that point?
Ooh.
Were you 18 yet or not quite?
No, I must have been 19. Probably.
Oh, 19?
Probably about 19, yeah. So.
So you got drafted and you went in. Pearl Harbor occurred on December 8th of 41?
Yeah, and I went into the Army just a little before Pearl Harbor in November, and I was down in Chicago visiting a friend, Oliver Carroll, at the time they bombed Pearl Harbor. And so when I come back, everything broke loose, you know.
Where did you have to report back to?
Fort Sheridan, Illinois. That's where I was at, Fort Sheridan. I had to go back to Fort Sheridan, and I hadn't been assigned to no place yet, so next Monday morning, why, this psychiatric guy, he called me in. That's the guy that places you, he's a psychiatrist, and he grilled me for about 20 minutes, and then finally he says to me, he said, "How do you get along with women?" And to be smart, I says, "I never had no trouble with my mother." And So looked at me and he says, from now on you'll be seeing lots of them dismissed. And then next day I looked, my name was up on Advanced Medical School, Camp Barkley, Texas. And that's where I took off for.
Did you receive specialized training down at Camp Barkley?
Right. I received for surgical technician.
And at that point, you hadn't even done basic training yet in the Army?
No, I never had to do any basic training. I went right into the medical school there. They trained us there, and then they set up the hospital. It was originally the 159th Station Hospital, and we boarded a ship at Charleston, South Carolina, and we were supposed to go to the islands, set up a hospital. And of course, the Japs that time was taking the island so fast that before we could get to one, they had it already. So we were 60 days on the water, and finally we run out of water and food, and they docked at Cape Town, South Africa, and they took on water and food and stuff. We were there about 3 days. Then a big English armament come by with all the battleships and everything. They were going up to take Madagascar back. And so we sneaked in with them, and when they started bombing Madagascar, we hit for Karachi, India. There was a small ship with us that had civilians on, and they were supposed to set up barracks up in Iran because they were going to had a route going to Iran that time to ship stuff up to Russia. And it went through Iran. So that before we got to Karachi, the Japs.
Were you on board that ship, or no? It was one of the smaller ships that was with
Right,
you?
yeah, they sunk that one. And we ended up in Karachi, India. And we set up a hospital there. It was 159th Station Hospital. Afterwards, they enlarged it to the 181st General. And from there, I spent 2 years down there in the Sindh Desert at that hospital. And
did you feel pretty well trained at that point as a surgical tech that the
well,
military?
they kept training us all the time, more. Because we only were half trained when we hit the ship, see. Mm-hmm. But they kept training you right at the hospitals,
And did they have doctors there assisting you, or did you oftentimes
No, they
have
had
to do?
doctors and nurses all the time. I worked with two plastic surgeons over there because we had a lot of when the Japs, they controlled India, Burma at that time, and they would shoot up the pilots that flew the hump, because at that time we didn't have no planes that could go high, So they had to go through them valleys in the Himalayas, and the Japs would shoot them up, and so we had a lot of them patients.
When you say fly the hump, what does that mean?
That's the Himalaya Mountains.
Okay, all right.
Yeah, the Himalaya Mountains. They had to fly from India over Burma, that's the Himalayas, to get to China. We had a couple small hospitals up in China, just little field hospitals up there, because we were taking care of the Chinese army up there. We were in with that, see. And so then in 1944, I volunteered to go up to the Chinese. We were running a hospital for the Chinese army up in Ramgarh, India. That's on the Burma border. And so I volunteered to go up there, and we just took care of Chinese army there. It was an army hospital for the Chinese army. It really shouldn't have been called a hospital because it was overrun with rats and everything else, And at night, rats, it just had a burlap ceiling in it, and then rats at night they sit in that burlap, and I used to take a big hypodermic needle on a bamboo pole and give them a poke.
So were you fixing up Chinese up there,
That
or
was
Americans
Chinese.
and Chinese?
Both. We had we had Americans that flew the hump, the pilots, a lot of pilots that come in shot up, and I was in charge of a surgical ward, just the Chinese army there. But I was on call at the operating room if at night, if I was working night duty, you had to run to the operating room quick if you had a call. And this one night, I got called to the operating room, and of course we only had a few doctors up there, so everybody knew everybody. And when I walked in, he said, "Faber," he said, "what blood type you got?" I told him. He said, "Just what we need." So they run a stretcher next to the operating table, and they run the blood from me right directly into this pilot because he needed fresh blood. They couldn't use plasma, you know. And he had top of his head, kind of his plate up in his head was off. And so, but he lived. They put a plate in there, and he lived. They sent it back to the States.
Great.
Yeah.
And what rank had you achieved at this point?
Corporal.
You were corporal?
We didn't get no high ranks in the hospital.
Yeah.
It was pretty well taken by the officers. They were all high rank, and officers was captains and colonels. I had one experience. Our colonel, he was. I worked in ENT for 2 years with 2 plastic surgeons, and
Is that ear, nose, and throat?
that's ear, nose, and throat. And so our colonel had a hospital down in Texas. That's where he come from. And he had a clinic down in Texas. See, so he kind of took our ward over as kind of a mascot for him, because that's what he was into. So he was always over having coffee with us, you know, in the morning. This one morning he come over and he said, "Do you have a private room that I could have?" He says, "I got some carbuncles on my rear I have to have lanced." And he said, "I would like a private room because," he says, "if I go to the officer's room, they're all going to come suck hole, you know, all that goes." And he was an old guy, he wanted to get some rest, he said. So he said, if we had a private room, and he said, "Yeah, we got one right there. You could have it." It was a contagious room, but nobody was in. So he said he took that, and so in there, and he had his carbuncles lanced, and he was in the room there. And the next night, when all the doctors and nurses went to dinner, I had to watch the narcotics and take care of the office while they were gone to dinner. And the colonel was in his room there, and all at once we had a little bell on the door, you know, and that bell rang, and I looked up, and I thought it was probably a major or something from the Air Corps coming to see one of his patients, because we had a lot of them patients in there. And so I just kind of looked up. I was sitting there with my feet up on the desk reading a comic book, actually, you know. And all at once the guy was right in front of me, and he said, "Soldier, could you tell me where Colonel Williams' room is?" Well, without thinking that there wasn't supposed to be no admittance there, you know, I said, "Yeah, right there." And he says, "Thank you," and he turned around to go. And just about the time he pulled the door open, I woke up and I hollered at him. I said, "Hey, you," I said, "there's no admittance there, can't you read, you know?" The colonel knew his voice, and the colonel says, "That's all right, Faber, let the general in." He was 2-star general.
Oh, really?
Boy, then I was worried. I thought sure I'd get broke down, you know. But see, in the hospital, rank stays at the door unless
Sure.
unless you belong to the hospital, because otherwise they could tell the doctor what to do. So,
Right.
So you have no rank when you come in a hospital, except the doctors that belongs to the hospital and the personnel, you know.
Sure.
So the next morning I went in to take care of the colonel, you know, and of course he knew I was kind of nervous, you know. And he said, "What's the matter, Faber? You look nervous today." And I just kind of grinned. He said, "If it was about the general," he says, "you was in your right." He said, "You had no right to come in." See?
Right.
So made me feel a lot better because I thought I'd be a private.
Yeah, yeah. Were you still in Burma at that time, or on the border by Burma?
That was up, yeah, that was at hospital at Karachi,
Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
yeah.
You received some medals or awards from the military?
Well, just the regular ones. I had all the ones that they give for then. They had for the being in before Pearl Harbor and the American Defense and them medals I had, but I don't even know where they are anymore.
That's all right. Recently, do you remember where you were when the war ended? Were you still in the Army at that time?
When I come back in '45, then the war was starting to end, so they shipped us back. We brought a bunch of patients back on a boat and landed in San Pedro, California. And we brought about 30 patients. They were patients that had a little something wrong with their mind and that. And so then I got went back to because we never had any time off all the time, because they were short of medics all the time. So the Army gave us 2 weeks free vacation down in Miami Beach, everything paid. We had 2 weeks down there at Ocean Drive, Ocean Beach. And so then when that 2 weeks was up, I got assigned to the Modesto, California General Hospital at Modesto. And I was there about 3 weeks, and then they assigned me to the Baxter General Hospital up in Spokane, Washington, and that's where I finished out the rest of my term.
So you spent 4 years or 5 years in the Army? 4 years?
Yeah. So I got discharged out of the Baxter General Hospital at Spokane, Washington, 1945.
So after you got out of the military, did you have an urge to stay in the medical field? Or
No, because I didn't have that, when you're in the Army, you don't need that degrees, but, when I only had an 8th grade education, I'd had to go back to high school and everything else, and so I had no hankering to do that.
Yeah. So recently here, a couple weeks ago, I understand you were provided with the honor to go on the honor flight out to Washington, D.C. Can you tell us just a little bit about your experience there?
Well, it was a beautiful flight. Everything went well, and I had when I signed up, I was feeling pretty good, but I had got a pinched nerve in my sciatic nerve, so I couldn't walk very good, and so I was going to cancel out. And then the guy told me over there, don't. He says that they have a chairperson goes along and they can push you in a wheelchair when you can't walk. I could walk some, but I couldn't walk too far. So I kept in, and I went and I got a chairperson out of Wisconsin Rapids. It was a gal. She was really a nice person. And so when I couldn't walk, she pushed me. Debbie Kaminsky, her name was. And so that turned out to be one of the nicest things that we had. They took us through all the monuments over there and all the stuff. It was a great day.
Great. Well, are there any other stories from the? Well, you had mentioned briefly that the ship you were with got torpedoed at one point. Do you remember the name of the ship that got torpedoed?
No, it was just a small ship. There was if I remember right, they said there was about 3,000 civilian workers on it, and they were supposed to go to Iran and build barracks and that, and they got torpedoed there. And
was it by a U-boat, or did the Japanese have submarines?
no, it was submarine. They torpedoed them.
Japanese or German?
It was Japanese. Yeah, and we were just lucky because they seen a torpedo coming, and our captain, he turned our ship so tight that the bow come right out of the water, and the torpedo went under us and hit the other boat.
Oh, I see. And were there any survivors on that boat that you recall, or?
Far as I know, that there was none because the rumor was that the Japs machine gunned all of them. Yeah.
Yeah, tough memories. Well, Corporal Faber, we thank you for your service to our country, and we appreciate you coming down here and sharing some of your memories with us.
Thank you. I'm glad I could do that.
Thanks. These are pictures of a young Corporal Faber during World War II. He states most of these were taken while he was in India, serving as a medic. What is that you're sitting on in this picture? Is that a wheelchair or?
That's a ricochet.
Oh, a rickshaw?
Yeah. Ricochet.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Corporal Faber in full dress uniform with his ribbons. And this is one of the medals he's preserved. It's a Freedom Medal from World War II. And we have an article from a letter that Mr. Faber wrote to the Star News at the time back in Medford. And if you want to pause the video to read the whole article, you can do that.
China, Burma, India, what's that?
There's his membership card from the China, Burma, India Service Association. And his card from the Hammond General Hospital.
My dearest son, it's almost June. I hope this letter catches up with you and finds you well. It's been dry, but they're calling for rain, and everything's the same old same in Johnsonville. Your stubborn old daddy ain't said too much, but I'm sure you know he sends his love. And she goes on in a letter from home. I hold it up and show my buddies like we ain't scared and our boots ain't muddy, and they all laugh like there's something funny about the way I talk when I say mama sends her best, y'all. I fold it up and put it in my shirt, pick up my gun and get back to work. And it keeps me driving on, waiting on letters from home. My dearest love, it's almost dawn. I've been lying here all night long, wondering where you might be. I saw your mama and I showed her the ring. Man on a television said something, so I couldn't sleep. But I'll be alright, I'm just missing you. And this is me kissing you. X's and O's in a letter from home. I hold it up and show my buddies like we ain't scared and our boots ain't muddy, and they all laugh 'cause she calls me honey, but they take it hard 'cause I don't read the good part. I fold it up and put it in my shirt, pick up my gun and get back to work. And it keeps me driving on, from home. Dear son, I know I ain't written. And sitting here tonight alone in the kitchen, it occurs to me I might not have said it, so I'll say it now. Son, you make me proud. I hold it up and show my buddies like we ain't scared and our boots ain't muddy, but no one laughs, 'cause there ain't nothing funny when a soldier cries. And I just wipe my eyes. I fold it up and put it in my shirt, pick up my gun and get back to work. And it keeps me driving on, waiting on. Letters from home.